So we are recording this podcast a bit later than we wanted to, but something just happened that I thought would be pretty interesting to share on the podcast. My dad, the windshield on his car actually just got smashed in. He was apparently like at some port somewhere. I don't know what he was doing, and he lifted up the front of his car, and for some reason, I guess it just broke and it went back and smashed right into the windshield and just smashed it in. So I had to give him my car, lend it to him. So it's pretty easy. I could show a picture of it right now. It's actually really interesting how it happened. So I had to just go and do that before we could record. But it is what it is. It's fine. It's a little bit later. I know you need some sleep. In fact, on the on our show notes here, you have it written down about like 8 times that I need sleep. Playing a little too much Palworld still, I'm guessing.
Yeah, hello guys. It's me, the little rookie, back again from the dead.
From the dead?
Yeah.
What?
Well, from the proverbial, from like the metaphorical like dead, or it's like the philosophical dead, where I'm just like, I'm away, right? And
I see.
Trying to, I'm trying to get back into a normal rhythm. After,
yeah, man. Like when you're dead, man. Yeah, man.
Yeah. After, after being out for so long. But yes, I'm back. Hello. The other 2 hosts couldn't be with us this week. They're busy with stuff. So
yeah,
it's
they have bot moment, which we might get into on a future podcast, but not for today.
It's just
they
you
are
and me.
Quite busy, and which we haven't had a podcast where it's just myself and the little rookie for a hot minute. So I just briefly mentioned Power. We talked about Powered on the last podcast, and you kind of went into the details of like how Powerworld was. But now I believe it's been out for like 9 days or something. How long is it?
I believe so. When we're recording this is the 29th, and Palworld came out on the 19th. Okay. So it's been about 10 days, roughly. It's been out for about 10 days, and boy, has it kind of like taken over the content creation space. From what I can understand, as soon as a popular game comes out, it seems to have taken over like the Twitch space as well as YouTube. And the thing about this is that what's interesting to me is that this game is still in early access, which means that there's plenty of time, for it to change and grow before it actually releases. But
right.
Extraordinary.
How many players are playing now? I have to ask.
Right now, I mean, it's probably currently the most played game on Steam. I could check for you right now, actually.
Okay, because I remember the last moment you sent me an update on it, which was before I even released the last podcast. It was while I was editing it. There was, I think you said there's like 7 million or something. Like, what? That's a lot. Like that outsold Pokemon Legends Arceus in like a week of just being on Steam. Very crazy stuff.
Yeah, Palworld is particularly an interesting case because it recently surpassed, I think, all of the games. In terms of concurrent players within a week of release or something, it beat Elden Ring, which was significant. And if you go on steamdb.info right now, it is currently the most played game as of this current moment, and players now are in 1 million. So there's 1 million people in-game playing Palworld right now, which is insane.
That is insane, yeah.
What kind of makes it insane to me is that, in particular, I think it showcases a couple of things. For starters, for the people who haven't been keeping up with the Pokemon Company, just people who tend to dive deeper into the Pokemon stuff, right? There's generally been like a bit of like disapproval or like disappointment towards the Pokemon Company because of certain changes that they've made in terms of their 3D games and stuff. So I believe what occurred here is that there's a huge like monster catching community, and they've had a lot of like disappointments with certain things. Like Pokemon Arceus was a great game, but it could have been better had they gotten more development time. And Scarlet and Violet having like barely like 30 FPS. You know, the windmill is
really
glitching in the background. It's absolutely horrible.
Anytime you go near water, like, oh my gosh, dude. Anytime you're in water in that game, it slows down to a crawl.
Yeah. Again, what Zeez and I are trying to highlight here is that the Pokemon Company has had repeated instances where they could have delayed a game on release in order to have a better product overall. And it's what, you know, older fans of the series have been asking for ages. And so to see Palworld come out with this astronomical release, it's, again, realize it's only been 10 days and it's already sold over like 9 million copies.
Right. Well, we do have to consider the fact that a lot more people do have access to PCs than a Nintendo Switch.
This is true.
You know,
yes.
Like, like the reason why like PC will outsell like most console games is just because the fact that like it's more accessible. Because most of the time people are already going to have a PC, and if you want to like, you know, play Pokemon, it's like, well, you have to go buy a Nintendo Switch, which would also be like $300, and it's like a lot of people just don't want to pay that when they're only going to want to play Pokemon. Whereas instead, if they already have a gaming PC due to other games, they can just pick up Palworld without having to, you know, grab a console for it as well, which I think could probably lead to, you know, somewhat inflated sales. But, you know, not to say that's like, the Palworld just has PC advantage or whatever. Like, I imagine if Pokemon was on PC, it'd have like similar, like better numbers. But, you know, it's just because it's been around for so long.
My main argument that I was trying to get to, or the main point of this entire thing, is that I think the Pokemon community has been waiting very patiently for like a genuinely like good open world 3D like Pokemon game. And they've been waiting for like maybe the course of over 10 years, you know, with the release of X and Y on Nintendo 3DS up until now, where, you know, the models are still roughly the same. And also it combines two of like the hubrises that are overseen by both Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. The Pokemon Company's unwillingness to falter, stubbornness in terms of being willing to innovate, and then Nintendo being like a console-focused company, where it's like, we will sell consoles and we will sell games that cater to consoles that we sell. So if you kind of remove both of those barriers, you get PC gamers who really like who really enjoy monster catching, and this trifecta, or like this breaking point, this point between the two of those intersections, where Palworld suddenly came in and is now currently blowing up Steam. And the thing is that and I'll comment more on this, but genuinely speaking, like, this game came out, kind of took the market in terms of where it could hit the hardest, and also delivered on the fact that the game actually runs pretty well and is like built in like Unity or an Unreal. So like the game actually looks pretty good. It runs well on PC, and it's like it's genuinely like a good like open world survival game. Like, I've been incredibly impressed with it, and it's only been 10 days, but I've played 120 hours.
Oh wow!
Which that's 12 hours a day. If you didn't calculate the math for that,
that's
so that kind of shows.
Kind of crazy. Wow.
That kind of shows.
Must be really good. It's funny because, you know, despite how popular the game is, I still haven't heard too much about it. I mean, I'm not really in the algorithm for it, but like, for example, big games that were like, you know, took the community, like most gamers by storm, and then like were like the big popular game for a while. For example, like, remember Among Us? Remember how popular that got during quarantine?
Yes.
Like that reached. I think Among Us was like probably way too popular because it reached like a lot of the normie people who don't really like playing games either. Plus, it was in quarantine as well, so like all the people who are like normies will, you know, search for something to find entertainment with. They'll play Among Us. So like, it hasn't really reached a point where I feel like Palworld is like has like meme culture, right? It doesn't feel like it has any meme culture around it, I guess. Whereas like a lot of other games will. But I actually wanted to ask specifically, just besides that point, I was looking at some of the Palworld designs, right? Some of the PAL designs. Which, for those who don't know, again, the PAL designs, those are what like the monsters of the game. And
the pals.
I do like some of them. I will say I do like some of them. I think I like the main mascot guy. He kind of looks like Totoro almost, or like some sort of like weird Totoro, like some sort of like Ghibli cat or something. I like him. Yeah. But I was looking at some of the other designs and they feel pretty uninspired. I won't lie. They really do look like knockoff Pokemon. Like actually, like there's a Pokemon that looks way too similar to Wooloo. There's a Pokemon that looks nearly identical to Mega Mewtwo Y, and it's just like it's kind of sad to see because like you have like this, you know, I mean from what I've seen, I haven't played Palworld, but you have like this awesome game, and you have all this like creativity being poured into it, but then like the monster designs are just they're pretty uninspired. Like they have like the same color palette and same sort of shapes and eyes as some of these Pokemon, and it's just like, huh. Well, you know exactly what that Pokemon or that pal is based off of, and I feel like does that take maybe a little bit of a magic away from the experience, or do you think they're gonna add in more pals that are, you know, a lot more original as opposed to just being ripped off of current Pokemon? I'm curious to know your thoughts on this.
So my understanding of this is there's absolutely, again, I think touching upon your point, there are absolutely some pals that are very similar to some Pocket Monsters. There's a pal in I think the worst example, or maybe the best example, is that in Palworld there's a pal by the name of Cremis, and if you put Cremis and Eevee right next to each other, they're basically the same mon. There's also like a Verdash, which is like a grass type bunny character, and if you put that right next to Scorbunny, it's like maybe an elemental swap between the two of them.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm looking at this Cremis thing, dude. That is literally just Eevee.
That one
That's
is
Eevee.
If I had to say it, I believe Cremis is probably the pal that I think is most close to being in like copyright infringement territory.
I see. Isn't there one that also looks like Leafeon, or is that still just Cremis?
I believe there is one, although my mind is currently blanking right now.
That's fair. I tried to interrupt here again. Do you have all the pals yet, or are you still like hunting for more pals?
So here's the interesting thing. The game has about 111 pals, but some of the pals have like alternate forms where they have like kind of like a Galarian form, or like the different alternate forms in Pokemon.
Alolan,
where it's like,
Galarian,
where it's like a pal will have maybe like a pal Noct, which is like the dark type version of that pal. And some of these things that you can only get through either extensive like adventuring, through certain boss fights, or capturing certain Pokemon capturing certain pals and breeding them together for certain combinations. So it's interesting. I mean, the thing about it is that there are a bunch of original designs in there. And then there's like definitely some of them that ride the line of Nintendo could they could if they really wanted to, they probably could for these, like this one particular.
I think I'm looking currently at like a list of all of the pals. I see one that looks a lot like Bayleaf in there. One that looks like Cobalion.
Yes.
But I also do see some original ones.
Yeah.
Some
there
of
for
these are
sure
pretty cute.
Some interesting ones, yeah.
Oh, there Joltog, that just looks like Shaman. This one just Kelpsy just looks like Dratini. Or it almost looks like they kind of combined some Pokemon together at the same time.
Yeah.
Like this one looks like almost like a Dratini like bird crossover or something. But yeah, no, there are some good ones in here as well. Yeah. Masanda. I'm not sure. Yeah, that one looks okay.
Yeah, it's the panda one.
Yeah, there's some cool ones in here. Maraith, that thing looks cool.
That one's pretty cool. I will mention, I think the thing is about Palworld is that now, I can definitely say a couple of ways, right? Nintendo recently, and this might be a good segue into the other Palworld related thing. But Nintendo recently released a statement regarding the Pokemon mods that were made for the game Palworld, because Palworld and Pokemon, they have a lot of similarities. There was somebody who made like a Pokemon mod for Palworld where instead of waking up as a nameless person, you wake up as Ash Ketchum, and you see Misty and Brock like carrying like their guns within Palworld. um, regarding this mod and the reason why they were able to take it down, from what I understand, the reason why they were able to take it down is because of fair use laws, where this person had put it up on Patreon, but like privated the Patreon mod so that it technically violated like a fair use law.
Oh, I think they put it behind a paywall. That's why they can take it down.
So since it was being sold as like a purchase, that guy got axed by Nintendo immediately. Which is like,
I believe the statement I heard was Nintendo has come for me or something like that. And I was like, what the heck? The Nintendo ninjas got him.
To be fair though, they were in their right for that one. Like, should not have put it behind a paywall.
I do want to say it. I saw just like the trailer. I didn't see any gameplay of like the mod, but I saw the trailer of it, and I was like, that's impressive for how like long this game has been out. There's already a Pokemon mod
it's
fast.
only been a couple of days, right? But realistically speaking, since there were a couple like early accesses and stuff, they probably had a chance to like maybe download some of the files.
I guess that's true.
And remodel it for those things.
But even then, like that would have to take the prediction of like people actually knowing that much about it, knowing that would catch on. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to know that was just like made so fast.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a strange world that we're living in, and I think I'd like to wrap up on the Palworld topic before I discuss what I think Palworld is doing to the gaming industry. But let me touch upon this last point, right? So
okay.
So the fair use mod was taken down by Nintendo, and then shortly after that, Nintendo themselves, or the Pokemon Company, released a statement basically detailing that, hey, we know that this game exists. They refer to it in the document as this game, and then they're like, we're going to investigate the game to see if there's any like fair use copyright. If there's like any copyright like problems here, and that's what we're gonna do, right? So it seems to me like the official statement seems to say to me that Nintendo knows, first of all, they know that Palworld is blowing up, and they're gonna at least go into the game to make sure that there's no like copyright issues, which is that's completely fair on Nintendo's part, because if there's any issues, then they can rightfully sue and stuff.
And I do think it would be really unfortunate if the whole experience was somehow taken away by like some sort of legal issues, which is why I really hope that they if they do somehow keep pushing on with Power, I hope they start putting in more designs that are not based off of Pokemon. More original designs, because like come on, like there are some good ones in there. Just like let those creative people make their creative designs. Don't just rip off Pokemon.
It's also interesting because shortly following like maybe the 3-day release of Palworld, there was a quick and apt response by the developers that said, hey, look, we understand this game is incredibly popular. We're going to put in like the hours to like create a dev roadmap for all of you guys, and have announcements and have patch updates and stuff, which is something that I really like about like games outside of the Nintendo space, is that you can participate in their Discord servers, and for different games that are coming out, you can hear about like, hey, the devs are working on this, and it's constantly like updating stuff. It's kind of like a live service game instead of like creating a closed content bundle. Yeah. So
I totally know that feeling. I've experienced that with some of like more indie games where it almost feels like the audience and the developers are like all together, and the communication feels so much easier. Whereas like, with big old Nintendo, we can constantly say things, but unless like a lot of people are demanding for one specific thing, it's not going to be heard.
For sure. It's like with like these indie games, I think it's a cooler experience. It's like smoother in some ways too, because like you get to talk, at least you get to put like inquiries to a smaller team that moves faster. Like large corporations, they have like a lot of bureaucracy, don't always move as fast, but you get this like sort of like closer-ish like relationship with the developers of a game like Palworld. And the interesting thing about Palworld, which makes it different from Pokemon, is that Palworld looks like it's going to be like a constantly updating game. So think of like a Minecraft version of Pokemon, That seems to be what Palworld is kind of
I
becoming,
see.
which is that, hey, we're going to release a new version. Palworld is currently focused on these like 4 islands that is currently released. Maybe they'll release new regions, which means that they'll release new pals.
I see.
For
Okay.
those things. So it's like it's a very interesting thing, and I don't know. It's just it's kind of fascinating to me. I had something else that I want to touch upon, but I guess I want to pass the mic over to you, Zeez, if there's anything else that you had.
Oh, well, you specifically said something about how Palworld is affecting the gaming industry. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
So, okay. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well, Zeez, because you've played a lot of games, and you've definitely played a lot more games than I have. Funnily thing.
That's true.
Just a small aside, but I recently went through a top 25 games list with my friends, where all of my friends were like, oh, I really like Assassin's Creed and like Baldur's Gate 3 and stuff. And I put down I was trying to do my top 25, and I only got to top 17 because I had only finished fully 17 games.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Most of them were Pokemon titles, and then some of them were I put Wii Fit Plus on there. It just shows I'm kind of grasping the bottom of the barrel a little bit. But
any Smash Bros, any Zelda, any Fire Emblem in there?
I don't know about Smash Bros. Smash Bros is great, but I get really salty when I play it. What I will say though is that the only Fire Emblem game that I've completed, and the only one that I've put on the top 25 list, is of course my favorite Fire Emblem game of all time, Fire Emblem Echoes.
Echoes.
Shadows
okay.
of Valencia.
Wait, you never beat Fates? I thought you beat Birthright.
I haven't beat Fates. I need to go through and genuinely. I've been holding off of the story for Fates. I actually don't know what happens
any
at
of the
the end of the
routes,
story.
or just?
I haven't beat Birthright, Conquest, or Revelations. I need to do that at some point. Yeah, that's on my to-do list, because I really want to do a Conquest playthrough, or a Fire Emblem Engage playthrough. Either one would be really fun right about now.
Oh yeah. Did you? I know we're probably gonna talk more about Fire Emblem later, but did you ever pick up Engage? I know you were thinking about it here and there.
I'm just gonna wholesale buy it when I have the money.
Okay. I know I've seen it on sale at sometimes for $40. Yeah. So if you find it on sale, maybe pick it up for $40 and not the standard $60.
Yeah, we should talk about Fire Emblem.
Well, you wanted to talk about how Palworld was affecting the gaming industry. If you want to talk about that before we jump in there.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thoughts on the gaming industry as of right now, and you can tell me what you think about this, Zeez. So let me do a quick recap of the history of the gaming industry. While in terms of my lifetime, recap of, just a small quick recap, right? Based off of my timeline of the gaming industry, right? So,
and at least your perspective and what games you've played with it, not so early as a whole, I guess.
Yeah. So early on in my childhood, right, we had Nintendo, who back in the day was everyone's sweetheart, right? Nintendo Directs came out. We had Satoru Iwata do the Nintendo Direct too, and it was really cool because back in maybe 2012 and 2013, Nintendo had a very it was everyone's sweetheart, right? The Nintendo Directs were really fun and playful. Reggie Fils-Aimé did the Yokai Watch, yokai, thing.
Yeah, he those also old beat style up. Directs were really classy and funny, kind of awkward, but apparently they were also pretty bad. It's kind of sad because they had personality, but apparently they were just kind of objectively bad, which was kind of sad. But I enjoyed the stupid little things that they did.
I actually disagree because I think they had so much personality with them. Reggie Fils-Aimé beating up the Japanese CEO for a Smash Bros commercial is just amazing, wonderful.
And it's memed all the time too.
Yeah, but so this is what I understand, right? Early on in the gaming industry, people had a lot of faith in the gaming industry to put out good games. There wasn't huge controversies over the games yet. That was early 2012, 2013. Then in 2018 to 2020, we started to get a lot of backlash against certain gaming companies where it's Blizzard is extorting their workers and also has a very toxic work environment. And you hear stories about how the Overwatch community and the World of Warcraft community has gone down. In 2018, you also heard stories about Sword and Shield being a complete and total flop. And then later on, Scarlet and Violet being like, this windmill is literally not rotating, right? And then you also hear like people who play Destiny, which is like the Bungie company just wrecking Destiny's economy or whatever. Stories about Assassin's Creed just starting to drop off or fall off greatly because, the gaming industry is like firing a bunch of people, or there's a bunch of mismanagement within these large.
There's been so many layoffs
companies
recently, and it's sad because like there's a lot of people talking about it, but it feels like it should be talked about a lot more. And it's not just the video industry, like the animation industry too. Lots of other industries are just going through like massive just fires upon fires, and it's so many layoffs. It's really sad to see.
So what I'm theorizing and what I'm kind of like hypothesizing, since we're currently living through the history of the video game industry, is that we had this like honeymoon period with video games where it was like these games are good, these companies are run well enough, and we have a really good back and forth with these game companies. And then like in 2018 or 2020 around the COVID era, we now have a lot of backlash against certain game companies. Like first of all, like the Genshin Impact community with the Hoyoverse company. Again, Bungie, Destiny 2, Blizzard, like really bad with their Overwatch and Overwatch 2 things with like Overwatch 2 promised to have a story, but then later on, like 6 months down the road, the devs were like, there's never any story, and we're never going to develop a story for that, which is like, that's bad. Like that's the point of the game.
Sad.
And then I believe another showcase of this, I might be forgetting something. The Pokemon Company is a big one, but there's just plenty of stories of like large AAA. Fallout 76 controversy as well.
I was going to comment on that, but I didn't want to interrupt you. That was another really big one.
Yeah, Fallout 76 came out. I was one of the people who bought it, and when I went into the world, it was like basically empty, not well developed. Like, of course they were going to release it first and then fix it later, but that doesn't feel very good, right? So we had this entire era between like 2018 and 2022 where it's like, we expect bad behavior from these large companies now. And largely the reason this is because these companies have become like large money-making machines. There's a lot of bureaucracy now, bad managers, and bad faith actors and such.
If I could jump in there, I have a lot of thoughts on this as well. You were talking about how Nintendo is everybody's sweetheart, whatever, the honeymoon thing, and I guess I kind of see that. We also have to consider the fact that, back when we were younger, we probably didn't see as much criticism as online as we do now. Because we were kids, we were more focused on the actual games, didn't really care about like the communities centered around it. We were just like, oh, fun game, go brr. I remember seeing people like in the past complain about a lot of certain things. I remember when Wind Waker first came out, everybody hated that game. They hated the art style of it because it was it was too kiddie, and now everybody like freaking loves that game. So there was obviously criticism in the past. But two big things that I'm thinking about when we're talking about like the gaming industry is just how much it's grown and how much dev time and how much bigger these games have gotten. I believe on Mr. Sakurai's YouTube channel, he has like a YouTube channel, the developer of Smash Bros. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about development of video games. It's actually really fascinating. If anybody is interested in video game development or even just like hearing about it, not necessarily going into that field, I definitely recommend looking at Mr. Sakurai's channel. He has some really great advice and just some things to learn on his channel. But he was talking about how games are so much more expensive. It takes so many more hours. It takes so much more time, money, experience, and learning to create now. Because in the past, right, it was so easy. Well, not so easy, but it was so much easier than now where you have to make giant, huge open world games. And to think about like, does it have online play? Can we ship it while it's still bugged? Like, it's so different now. And like, think of like all the monetization that we have now too, with DLC, in-game purchases, and games have always been, like, in my opinion at least, one of the most beautiful art forms out there. because it combines so many different talents into one place. You know, you've got programming, you've got the visual sides of everything, you have beautiful music, you have extremely talented voice actors voicing characters, and the list goes on, right? And as these games continue to get bigger and bigger, more and more people have to be, you know, all these talents have to be put into one place, which just makes things just more and more difficult. And it's why we see like prices rising up as well. But with all these, you know, bigger games coming out, that also leads to bigger communities, bigger industry as a whole. And it's really fascinating to, you know, see how much gaming has grown and how it's like, you know, in the past when we were kids, I remember we got bullied for liking games. Like, oh, you're a gamer, you're cringe, you're a loser. But now gaming is like cool, right? It's kind of like how anime was cringe when we were in school, but now anime is seen as like a cool mainstream kind of thing, right? It's really weird to see how things like shift.
Yeah, I think it's weird. It's strange, but like there's a lot more gamers now for starters, and there's a lot more consoles like being sold, a lot of like free to play games online. So as long as you have like a semi-productive like computer, generally speaking, you can access games at a higher rate than most others. Most others in terms of back when we were kids, you know, I still remember when we had the chance to like walk into the local Walmart or game shop or like what GameStop, local GameStop to like get DS download play, right? Because the internet wasn't a big thing.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
You could
the
trial
DS
games.
Plays.
You could trial games, but you had to go in person. You had to meet people, right? And if you wanted to trade Pokemon with people, there wasn't this huge online space. Like sometimes the online world thing didn't even work properly.
I could never get the GTS to work back in Gen 4.
Yeah, you can trade with people online. So you actually had to know people, and like I'd actually have to, if I even knew like Zeez back then, I'd have to walk over to his house physically and like knock on his door physically, and then like get 2 DSs physically and sit across from each other. Like it's a more personal experience. It's one that I also miss a lot, because with increased digitalization, you know, increased convenience, it does take away some of these small joys that I had in terms of physical, you know, being in person with these friends and having co-op sessions. There's pros and cons, but I do think there's something very interesting happening to the gaming industry, and this is what I'm going to talk about later, or like right now, but is there anything else that you like to touch upon, Zeez, before I get into the meat?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I've touched upon a couple of eras, right? So the first era that we had was like back when gaming was kind of small, kind of niche. It was like the baby, the sweetheart, right? We liked gaming for what it was. There was like playthroughs back in the day because YouTube incentivized long form video formats that kept people coming back to those long form videos. So we had a lot of playthroughs. We had a lot of like even Markiplier and Jacksepticeye got their start on this, you know, older legacy of YouTube, which was just like longer form content and stuff. So we had the sweetheart era. Then we have the backlash AAA like developer era where it's like, you know, there's actually some malpractice here in terms of like, we put a lot of trust in these companies to manage their IPs correctly, and then like we pay out money for like things like Overwatch or like World of Warcraft or Fallout, and there's a huge backlash now. There's a lot of drama in the gaming community. There was a lot more like big-ended drama now than there was like back when Zeez and I were like going to school or whatever.
I think it's also because there's a lot more avenues to complain now, because we have like online things where, you know, back then it was just like maybe on forums or anything, but now we have just so many different ways, from social medias to conferences, directs, whatever, all these different ways to complain, I guess, or to leave criticism. Maybe not constructive criticism, just like actual, just straight up complaining. Yeah.
It's like the raw emotion of complaining rather than actually anything of substance. It's like, if TikTok existed back in the day, we'd see people like probably TikTok dancing in front of a 3D rendered Pokemon Pikachu. Just like Fortnite dancing on Pikachu. Like, what are these 3D models? here's an interesting thing, and the thing is that I'm going to touch upon, which I think is a very interesting thing that might be happening. I'm not sure if it's going to be a huge shift in the gaming community, but we've had for so long a backlash of people talking back against, like, not necessarily bad developers, but bad company practices where they take people's goodwill with certain games and they trash it, right? So, like, I love Pokemon. Scarlet and Violet didn't have, good frame rate, could have had a lot more development time, right? They're treating their devs poorly. We've come from a backlash era against huge companies that we used to think as sweethearts. And now, I think something very interesting is happening. Because if you've heard about if you've heard anything about Baldur's Gate 3, right? Last year in 2023, when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, it was widely praised for being one of the most outstanding games of the entire year. Largely due to a couple
winning
of
Game of the Year
factors.
as well.
It did win Game of the Year, and the reason why it did, in my mind, is because it didn't release an unfinished product on launch. It didn't give it extra DLC or extra in-game purchases, and it came out fully finished with stellar voice acting and stellar animations for its game. Fully finished game and intense amount of customization, where if you wanted to do this thing, you could basically do literally anything in the game, and the developers had thought of an outcome for your game, which is or the individual experience that you had, which is very D&D. It's a very tabletop roleplay, right? This is a game that came from a company called Larian Studios, which is it's a smaller lesser known company. It's one that certainly I didn't know of until Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and then it just took the entire gaming industry by storm, right? There were certain responses to it where it's Baldur's Gate 3 came out and it's one of the best games ever. And then you also had Call of Duty developers or certain developers on the other side being this isn't something that we should expect from a game because of dev times or whatever. So Baldur's Gate 3 came out. It completely shattered our perception of a really good game in the gaming industry. Baldur's Gate 3 was huge. And then right after Baldur's Gate 3 came out, a month after the Game Awards, Palworld comes out and completely shatters the monster catching community, I would say, and quickly becoming one of the most sold games on Steam and one of the most concurrent player base within the last 10 days at least. So this is one of the points that I was going to touch upon, which is that we've gone from sweetheart to these game companies have become super large, and now I think that we're coming to a place where these smaller indie companies are, since they can move faster than large AAA companies, since they can, they don't have to go through all the bureaucracy of going through this person's manager's manager. I think we're kind of entering an age where smaller game companies are starting to outpace the large game company giants of the last decade. That's the main point I'm trying to get.
Interesting thought.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't really consider that too much, but I guess Racecar 67 was commenting on that with the animation industry as well, where we're seeing a lot of the indie animators, with Amazing Digital Circus, Hazbin Hotel, and whatnot, how they're standing toe-to-toe with these big companies, right? And, I think most people would agree, it's always fun to see a smaller team stick up against the big companies, right? Because the big companies, there's just too much there, and they're always just so... Nobody likes a big company, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go into it or whatever, but nobody likes the big old companies. They're too big. They have too much monopolized. But it's like constantly rooting for an underdog. So to see these underdogs constantly getting these wins and pulling numbers on par or even better than the big companies, you love to see it as just for innovation just as well, because now the big companies can be like, well, we're gonna have to focus, like, since we have obviously we have more like talent on our side, right? We have more talent on our side, whereas they have more, better, I guess, like easier structure and management or whatever, since they have like a smaller team or whatnot, or they have clearer visions maybe. Less people working on things, so it's easier to manage, whatever. There's a whole 1,000 different things to go into it. But at least at these AAA studios, they have so much talent gathered, right?
Yeah.
And as long as they just, I don't know, focus more on creating things that are good, as opposed to just only focusing on monetization or doing the same things they've always done. It's a constant battle for innovation and adaptation in the gaming industry. And it's funny. It's really interesting to watch it evolve, and seeing now that like indie developers can be on par with AAA studios. It's really fascinating.
I think it's really interesting too, because it's like, what was I trying to say? It's like Palworld completely like shattered expectations. Like nobody was talking about this game 10 days ago. I didn't even know that the game existed like 12 days ago. And as soon as it came out, it shattered like all of the Steam like records in terms of the first, like the game most concurrently played, or the game that made it, to the top within the first week. What I'm starting to realize is that we're coming into an age of maybe anime and gaming. Maybe there's maybe some like argument where like these two industries are like kind of running concurrently, where it's like the anime industry is also pretty bad in a couple of ways. Like, animators they don't get treated that well, right? They're always overworking, and the CEOs are like
overworked, underpaid, like for sure, and just
exactly
a lot of oversaturation from what I've seen in like a lot of seasonal anime releases. I'll look into like some of the seasonal anime releases, and it's like, okay, it looks like there's like 5 good titles here of substance, and then the rest is just like copy pasted freaking fantasy stories, just like boring stuff. It's just I got hit by a truck and now I'm like a god in like freaking fantasy world. It's like, bro, who cares? Like there's like 80 other stories like it. Like give us more of like the ones that have substance. Why not make animes on I don't know, stories of substance, as opposed to just like I don't know, oversaturated nothingness.
Yeah, and like what we're starting to see is that like with titles like Hazbin Hotel, which is like, these are like independent studios that have like started from the ground up, and like big props to Larian Studios and I guess Pocket Pair for Palworld. Also, a big thing that's kind of interesting is that Lethal Company has also been a huge story of one kid who developed Roblox games, now becoming a like massive like success developer, earning like millions of dollars, because there's genuinely like, what I think is interesting is that gamers are starting to vote with their wallets,
right, yeah,
in the right directions, where it's like, we have noticed that there's been this shift in the gaming industry, and we have chosen to prioritize quality over quantity. And that's the big takeaway from like my 20 minutes of yapping, right? we as gamers,
I get that, yeah.
Like we really want quality over quantity. That's the thing that we've been talking about for like years, months, like a decade at this time. And it's so like fascinating to see like, Baldur's Gate come out and shatter the game industry. There's a lot of drama around like, oh, you can't expect us to make such a good game. Like, why shouldn't we? Like, why shouldn't gamers expect to have like a good gameplay experience that comes out on launch and isn't extortionate, right?
I think I totally get what you're saying. Is like, I think most people, I mean, obviously it is like pretty difficult for developers to spend so much time on games, and it's especially interesting to consider like, I remember Mr. Sakurai talked about this as well. He's like, well, a developer can only develop so many games, right? And considering how long dev cycles are now, like up to 5 years, it's like, well, considering like how long a person works, like if they start working at the age of like, let's say get into the industry at the age of 25, and if a dev cycle is 5 years, how many games can you realistically even work on then? Like, let's say you want to retire at 60 random number. So you're gonna work on 7 games. That's it, 7 your entire life. That's all you get, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about, And it's just like that thing is like, well, gamers do want that quality over quantity, and like less like annoying monetization and whatnot. So if you just make a good product, like it's gonna be timeless. It's we want more of those timeless, solid games that are just fun and not tedious. I don't even know. I get what you mean though. Like wanting to pay for stuff that we will enjoy, as opposed to just like, oh, we need a new Pokemon game every 2 years. Like, I mean, I didn't buy the Sword and Shield DLC. I still haven't. Like, I might one day, but like that's talking with my wallet. I still haven't bought it because I just wasn't interested in it. And if I swear to you right now, I'm not 100% sure if I'll do this because I'm a content creator, but if Black and White remakes are made by Ilka and they look exactly like BDSP, I don't think I'll buy it. I actually don't think I'll buy it. I was so close to not buying BDSP, but I grew up with Sinnoh, so I caved with that. I also wanted to make content on it. But if Black and White looks like BDSP, I don't think I'll buy it. I don't think that I will. I think a lot of other players won't either.
I've been wanting for so long for them to like take the Octopath Traveler like 3D animation,
like
that would be 2D nice. 2D 3D animation, and use that for like older console like Pokemon games. But man, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was in other words, it's like in the shortest amount of words, it was disappointing, right? Because
extremely disappointing.
I wasn't too big on the chibi art style, and I don't think that it really translated well into like the 3D space. There's also a couple of mechanics that were in there that I wasn't too like pleased with. I think the point is that
They literally copy pasted code.
Yeah, literally. Like
that's why there were so many bugs in it, because they literally copy pasted code.
It's just like
that's why you could duplicate Pokemon in so much stuff. It was insane.
That's crazy. I didn't even know about that.
No, you could do a lot of stuff in BDSP. I mean, a lot of it's been patched out now, but like when the game first came out, there were so many duplication glitches. Like you could duplicate items, Pokemon, all you wanted, and it was insane. It was insane how many bugs there were, and it's because it was just thrown together. It was literally 1-to-1. I genuinely think if you want to play Sinnoh, just play Platinum. Do not play BDSP.
I still think that Platinum is better than Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. And I still think that if you want to play Diamond and Pearl, you should just play Diamond and Pearl.
I honestly say no, because Diamond and Pearl are pretty slow. At least BDSP speeds it up a little bit. So if you want to play like Diamond and Pearl, play BDSP. But if you want to play like the Sinnoh experience, like just one game, play Platinum.
Yeah, just play Platinum.
Play BDSP.
Don't play any of the other games. Platinum is very good. It's done well. There's more than 2 fire types, thank goodness.
Yeah, and there's the reverse world. Like, ooh, baby.
That's the thing that I really, really, really enjoyed about the gaming industry back in the day. And it's like, it's one of these weird things again that I'm going to mention it, where it's like we're starting to get like interesting changes in both the animation industry as well as the gaming industry, where it's like anime companies are now going to Kickstarter and getting some of their funding to allow them to have more development time, better practices within the industry. Like the creators of I'm blanking on it right now, but I think it's Trigger, right? Trigger got some money.
I heard about that. Yeah,
Trigger kickstarted some of their animations and made really, really good products. And then we also have like for the gaming industry, we've gotten a lot of we've shifted into an era where it's like AAA like large companies can coexist with smaller developers that have Discord channels, that have announcements that you can like gripe about certain issues and immediately get changes for certain like issues. Like there's either like you get the industry experience, or you get the experience where it's like I get to have like more info directly from the developers, and we're closer to the development team, and the development team is, less big than the gaming industry. And both of these avenues are starting to become like somewhat equally viable, especially since Lethal Company has one developer and has outsold like several or like a couple of AAA industries, which is insane. Like Lethal Company has outsold some people. Among Us also has outsold some people.
I've seen just like with like the Lethal Company thing, I didn't even know it was made by one developer, but it was just like looking at how how many people have played the game. Like, I didn't even know the game was like a thing until like some YouTubers started playing it. But it's just like, wow, that's impressive how far it's gone with just one developer.
Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's crazy. We're in a weird place, Zeez, right now. Like, I'm excited for both the anime industry and the gaming industry, because what marks what has been like a decade of, or not a decade, but like a couple of years of despair, right? Which is just like, please, Pokemon Company, make a better game than Pokemon Sword and Shield. And they're like, okay, we're gonna cut the development time on Arceus. Here you are. There's some issues here. It's like, oh, okay. Arceus was a great game, like good step in the right direction. Please make a better game for the next one. And Pokemon Company is, all right, we're gonna cut the development time on Scarlet and Violet and make it worse. And you're like, no, not quite, right? It's just like this despair where you're just like, listen to me, right? The gaming, like, we're saying things that you should be listening to because we're your customers. And the Pokemon Company is like, let's pump out another game, right? And now we're in a weird situation where like Palworld is directly threatening, or at least hindering, the Pokemon market, right? So there's competition now.
I would say at least I wouldn't say hinders, but at least say it's like there's competition for them.
Yeah,
which is good. Competition breeds great. Innovation.
Yeah. At least in this industry, like competition between companies is an amazing thing, because you can expect better products from both sides. Like, they're fighting against each other now.
Right.
So I'm kind of excited, Zeez. Like, we're in a weird space now where it's like all this despair is now turned into like these seedlings of possibility, right? Who knows what's gonna happen next? I sure know that I'm just kind of fascinated to see where everything goes from this. I want to see what Pokemon Company's response is going to be, at least. If they're going to respond with an even better game, or if they're going to retract and be like, this is the best that we can do. Like, genuinely, I'm fascinated to see what the Pokemon Company's response is going to be.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to see what their next product is that they're going to put out next. I hope it's just not Black and White Ilka remake. That would be pretty disappointing, but we'll just have to see. And aside from all the studio layoffs and all these people losing their jobs, aside from that, which is very unfortunate through all those people, I am really excited for the next step of I guess these two big entertainment industries and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about that for a long time. And I know we want to wrap up the podcast soon, but I did want to touch upon Fire Emblem Engage for just a little bit here. Yeah. So Fire Emblem Heroes is a mobile game where a bunch of Fire Emblem characters come together, and you can, get your favorite heroes in the game. And every single year, you can pick 4 characters from this contest called Choose Your Legends. And those 4 characters will get alternate costumes in the game. They'll be super, super powerful, and they get like extra bits of lore about them. It's really cool, right? It's really cool. Every single year, all the Fire Emblem fans, they look forward to it. And this year, Fire Emblem Engage was the most previous game that came out, and everybody thought like the top 4 characters were going to be from Fire Emblem Engage. And it turns out that it wasn't. Not a single Fire Emblem Engage character made it into the top 4, which was really sad, at least for me, because I really enjoy Fire Emblem Engage. But a lot of my comments on the video, and a lot of comments that I've seen recently about Fire Emblem Engage, are kind of just calling it like a mid-game. And that, like, oh, 3 Houses had a better story, better characters. Mm-hmm. And it's a little sad to see, honestly, because I was somebody who really enjoyed the game. I thought like the story and characters were a little bit corny at times, but I thought it was still good. And I think about the gameplay of Engage, and I think about like, would I want to play Fire Emblem 3 Houses right now, or would I want to replay Fire Emblem Engage? And every time I pick Fire Emblem Engage, and I keep hearing all the time just in Fire Emblem Engage hate, or just Fire Emblem Engage like is mid, or it's like compared to all these other Fire Emblem games, it's just not as good. And that's really sad to hear, honestly. It's really sad to hear as somebody who is a pretty big fan of Fire Emblem Engage. And I'm almost wondering, because this was something that we saw with Fire Emblem Fates and Awakening. Mostly Fates, right? Because Fates, we like complaining about it, right? Because the story is kind of cringe. It probably has one of the worst Fire Emblem stories, but like it still has a lot of interesting stuff about it. Yeah. It just feels like they could have expanded on it a lot more. And a lot of the characters are pretty gimmicky. which is still, the case in Engage. There are some gimmicky characters, but I feel like they go beyond their gimmicks pretty well in Engage. Fire Emblem Fates, though, definitely has, like, I'd say like 60% of the cast is just gimmicks, and even then, even like the important characters have just gimmick. It's a lot of gimmicky characters.
Yeah.
But I would say that, like, people now look at Fire Emblem Fates and are like, yeah, it's a good game though. Like, yeah, the characters are gimmicky. The story is like not fully put together. It still need a lot more work. But the game was fun. The gameplay was super, super good. Like, and the overall presentation of the games and the balancing and everything made for a really, really good time. And people look back on those games and they're like, yeah, you know what? Fire Emblem Fates isn't bad. Fire Emblem Awakening isn't bad. These are good games. And now people are saying, oh, Engage is a bad game, or it's like not nearly as good as like Three Houses. And it's honestly like, are we just repeating the same cycle? Like, I know we were just talking about this earlier with like gamer feedback, response, hate, whatever. I'm wondering if this is going to be the same case with Fire Emblem Engage, where people just see it as nothing more than a gimmicky anniversary title. But then in like 5, 6, 7 years, people are going to look back on it with like lots of fondness and appreciating the characters. And I think there is still some love for Engage because while no Engage character did win, it was the second game that had the most votes in total of all the characters. Three Houses still had, spread out through all their characters, they had the most votes. But Engage came in second, and they were pretty close to tying with Three Houses too. But I think at least what happened to Engage was that some of the Engage fans out there were saying that maybe Engage wasn't actually bad because the votes were actually just pretty spread out through all the characters, right?
Yeah.
For example, I think one of the highest placing characters was Diamond, but there were so many characters that were, not too far behind him, maybe just like 100 votes behind, and it's just like a lot of these Engage characters placed pretty well in the results, but no one could just concentrate on a single character, and that's why they didn't win. So it's really interesting to see like the discourse and what's surrounding Fire Emblem Engage right now, if people consider it to be good, bad, whatever.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of notes on this. So first of all, I think one of the main issues with this is, and maybe like the first point that I would probably point out is that Fire Emblem Heroes' audience is dwindling. It's not as big as it used to be. Say. Like we used to get like 100,000 like votes per like CYL or like Choose Your Legends, but nowadays it's like teetering around like maybe the 13,000, right? It's a lot smaller. But actually I think this is kind of an interesting thing, right? So Fire Emblem Engage, the reason why I think it didn't do as well in the Choose Your Legends event is because of the premise of Fire Emblem Engage. First thing is that if the premise of Fire Emblem Engage was that you basically get to play as like a cast of characters that get to summon, like spirits of the other like 12 Fire Emblem games to help you out in battle for this like 12-year or 25-year anniversary for Fire Emblem. And the thing is, I think that's probably the reason why like some of the votes got kind of spread out, is because with each like main character in Fire Emblem Engage, it's also kind of also boosting up another character. Like for instance, like if you liked Ilir, then there's a big chance that you might also like Marth, who was like a big thing in that game. And in Fire Emblem Fates, there was only the Fire Emblem Fates cast. Like there was only like this cast of characters from this game only. But in Fire Emblem Engage,
I didn't think about that. That's actually like, I don't know how much that would affect it, considering a lot of the characters in the game have already won CYL. Like it's like the previous Lord characters, main characters. But yeah, I do see what you mean. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, like Fire Emblem Engage was a game about all of Fire Emblem, and so I kind of see why all of Fire Emblem's votes was very spread out this time, because the intent of the game was in homage to the entire series. The other big thing that I will harp on Engage about is that the story, like the designs for the characters were incredibly pretty, but the characters themselves didn't have a lot of story depth, right? Fates had a lot of like characters where they were like only very gimmicky. Like this is a horrible example. We had a psychopathic murderer that only talked about murder all the time, and
Oh,
that was
Perry,
somehow supposed to be
yeah,
our ally in Fire Emblem Fates.
Yeah, Perry.
But-
well, that's honestly probably the worst example.
That's
of
the
a Fire
very
Fates gimmick.
the worst example.
Bottom
I
of
can
the
bring up.
barrel. Yeah, she's probably like the worst character in the game.
Even that character had interesting interactions with other like interesting characters because it was hard to like write around her and stuff. I think the thing about Fire Emblem Engage's characters is that there just wasn't enough time to flesh out the depth in their character. Like, these are incredibly pretty designs, like pretty 3D modeling, but the characters themselves didn't really have that much depth outside of I'm the dancer, I like to eat a lot, I like to exercise a lot. I also like to exercise a lot.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I think the Lord characters, like obviously with Fire Emblem having support conversations, which for those who don't know, it's basically like side content where you get to learn more about the characters and you get to watch special little interactions between certain characters to learn more about them. But yeah, I think I do know what you're saying, where it's like on the story itself, you could honestly take out like most of the lords, and because they don't really necessarily do anything specific in the plot, I guess is what you're saying. Where like in a game like Fire Emblem Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn, it feels like every character has like an important role.
Right.
Whereas like the four lords are kind of just there to be like, oh, we're here now, main character Alear, you do the work while we stand behind you and look cool or something like that. I think I kind of do understand what you mean by that.
I also think it's kind of troubling because I do think, and I just want to say this like candidly, I do think Fire Emblem Engage had too many characters, right? So the premise of the game, I think Fire Emblem Engage had too many characters for it being like an anniversary. Because you think about it, right? So you have 4 kingdoms. Each kingdom has 2 lords, a sibling and like an older sibling, and then each of those siblings have 2 retainers. So you have to get and also
that's
each of the
true.
And each of the maps also had like low this is like super like Fire Emblem stuff. So I'm just gonna go into the nitty-gritty of it and we'll talk about it a little bit. But it's like I think the thing is that like the thing about Fire Emblem Engage and the reason why I think the characters didn't make such a big impact is because like you would go into a map, it would have a low deployment rate, which meant that you couldn't deploy your entire army. You could only deploy like maybe a handful, like 5 to 10.
That's true. It did actually have some low deployment, especially in the early. In the later maps, it's better, but like in the early maps, there was actually some pretty small amount of deployment. Now that you even mentioned that,
super low deployment, and the worst thing about that is that you would constantly get new characters. Like the first chapter would be like in Firene, which is like this blossom flower kingdom. You get 2 lords. You get 4 retainers, and you'd be like, these are cool retainers. And then after that, you go to the next kingdom, you get another 2 lords and another 4 retainers.
4 retainers, yeah.
There's a
and then
huge
there's like
cycle.
some bonus characters in there as well.
Exactly. It was like the story didn't really incentivize it. The story didn't really incentivize these characters to like stick around in the consciousness for too long, right? So like
that's always been a flaw of Fire Emblem, where it's like, here, it's me, Guy from Village, and now I'll never say anything in the story again. That's kind of how it was in previous Fire Emblem games, but I see what you mean, because at least for the previous game, 3 Houses, the students, like, they were always important to the story, right? They were always like a family, sort of like that you would take a journey with. And each one of the students had like their own depth and relationships, and I see what you mean. I think it's just because it was riding off the tail of Fire Emblem 3 Houses, which everybody loved. It had so much depth between all the characters. And even though like I feel like 3 Houses needed another year or 2 of development, the characters in the story were just so rich and so good.
Yeah.
Even though they could have expanded on a lot more. Like 3 Houses truly did need like another 2 years, because in my opinion, you basically play the same game 4 times. There's very few different, like one route is like 99% as there's like one map that's different for like 3 different routes, and then there's like there's a 4th route that's like has 3 different maps or something. It's like pretty much you're playing the same game 4 times in a row if you want to do all the routes. The only thing that differs is like the characters and the stories, but otherwise it's like it's the same game.
I honestly think that you can take some of the characters out of Engage and it would not change the story that much.
It definitely wouldn't. I actually think it's actually pretty small, but the thing is they have to have a good amount of characters in case you lose them, right?
But here's the thing, right? The reason why I think that Engage has too many characters is because the emblems are also characters. And since the game itself is an homage, not only it has to do two things, right? It has to balance the tightrope on two different things. And props to the devs for somewhat making this work. But basically, it has to balance two different sides of the story. It has to balance its own world and its own story, and then B, it has to balance the worlds of the entire Fire Emblem franchise, which is that's bonkers, right? So you have 12 emblems or whatever. So you have 12 different rings. Each one of these characters is another just main character also. So you now have a ginormous cast where you're constantly cycling through characters, constantly talking through them. And some of the supports aren't even that great between some of the characters. They're kind of short in comparison to some of the older games. There's not a lot of depth. There's not a lot of intrigue, you know? I think the worst example of this is that there's Boucheron. There's this fighter from the very, very beginning of the game. He's just a fighter guy. He's I'm Boucheron. I'm
Boucheron,
I'm
the leader
fighter.
of the Bouche Nation.
I'm the retainer for this guy. And it's okay. And then you get to the next kingdom and you're I'm Claire. I really like fairy tales. And you're okay. And then you go into the next kingdom and I'm the chef guy. I like cooking. And you're okay, we can cut this guy out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's
no, there are definitely some gimmickies. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Fire Emblem has always had characters like that. I think it's just again with Three Houses specifically. All the characters were important because they were all the students at the academy. And since you could cross over characters and whatnot, there was never any character in there that was a gimmick, right? They had no gimmick characters, whereas Engage did kind of go back to the gimmicks.
It was also just shallow characters. I don't know anything about the chef guy. I kind of know something about.
Okay, they're not necessarily shallow, but it's just they have nothing in the story, right?
There's nothing.
They have no depth
them.
in the story. The only thing they have depth in is the support conversations. Whereas with characters. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, they all have important story, but it's Ash, in White Clouds, he has to kill his own father or whatever. That's a good example of a story bit. And Petra has her relationship to Bridget, which comes up in the stories sometimes. A lot of different things that characters will have importance in, or at least they'll have commentary on that. But for example, Boucheron, after chapter 4 or 5 or whatever,
I literally don't know anything about him.
He's never mentioned at all. He doesn't show up in the story ever again. Whereas the students in the Fire Emblem, they're there every single chapter, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people want more of, is the characters in the cast to have more importance in the story aside from just the lords.
Yeah, right? it's I don't know anything about Boucheron other than he's a chunky boy who kind of looks like a Minecraft character, right? And it's genuinely when I talk about this the big comparisons here are between the two games, Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Engage, right? Fire Emblem Fates had some gimmicky characters. We had All Might Arthur, who was I'm a super unlucky guy.
I'm justice!
For justice! But the thing about it, Justice Man, is that he actually had a really good backstory where he's he tied very smartly into a lot of the Lord's backstories where it's with some of the main characters, he was I helped you get out of the castle, or some of the other characters where it's I came to to murder this royal and I ended up becoming their retainer. That's really interesting. That's a really cool retainer story where it's these are my retainers. That's the stuff
you only get from support conversations.
Exactly.
It's never mentioned in the story.
This is how these people became my retainers, and instead in Fire Emblem Engage, largely it's about this one character talking about meat and singing all the time about meat, and you're just something, maybe give me something, maybe the chef made some meat for this character.
No, I get that, because I think a lot of the I think there are so there are some really good supports in the game, but I feel there are a lot of too chill support. There's the slice of life stuff that a lot of support conversations have in Fire Emblem, but I feel there might be a little too much of that. A really good example of a counterplay of that is Celine and Alfred's A support. There's a support between those two. They're siblings of one of the kingdoms, and I won't spoil it, but it is one of the most gut-wrenching it hurts, dude. After you read that support, it completely recontextualizes Alfred's whole character, and it's why is that not in the main story? Why do you have to find that in the support conversation? It's that's cool to find in the support conversation, don't get me wrong, But like if that was in the main story, that would be so much cooler because it completely recontextualizes his entire character.
I know
and what he's about.
I think the weird thing is that there's also just too many supports. Like they should have gone the three houses. In three houses, there were supports, right? There was C, B, and A.
Well, there was a lot of supports in three houses,
which basically represented like how far you could get with certain characters and stuff. But some characters could only go up to B, and some characters could only go up to C. And I think that's actually like contrary to popular belief or like popular hearsay. I think that's actually the way that most human relationships work. Like some people are going to be closer, and some people are not going to be as close.
No, I definitely think that's 100% true. Yeah.
In Engage, there was just CBA for everyone.
Others, yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
In Engage, there was like
for those who could support.
Yeah,
least,
most of the supports had like CBA, so it's just like. I feel like the writers had to really like thrust themselves out there to get these gimmicky characters to get them to A somehow. It's like, I cook, but I did it for my dad. And you're like, oh, he did it for his dad, guys.
I see.
He did it because his dad was a cook. He's really cooking.
I know. I definitely do think, to kind of wrap up this discussion, I definitely do think like it's going to be look back on with fondness after a lot more years pass, kind of like with Awakening in Fire Emblem or Fates. But I think the fact is just like it came off of Three Houses, which was so different. I guess it was such a different direction for the series, and I think people really want more characters that are focused on throughout the entirety of the story, as opposed to just hi, I'm gimmick character, I show up for one chapter, have some dialogue, and I never show up in the story again. Like, yeah, you can love that character and their side content, but like that's all you're gonna get.
I also disagree
Whereas
with
like the students of Three Houses, they're always omnipresent. Like if you choose their route, they're there the whole time unless they die.
Yeah, I also disagree with like the popular thing where it's like I recently saw a YouTube video by someone who was like, the art is really pretty, the story's like kind of mid, and like the what is it? The music is bad. And I was like, the music isn't bad.
What?
The music is actually
great.
The music slaps. Like the 3D modeling was genuinely good. Like I like all the UI changes that they did.
And I personally think the gameplay of Fire Emblem Engage is so much better.
The gameplay of Fire Emblem Engage is probably like very, very high S tier, right? It's like
I think a lot of people say it's mid.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it's mid. I think it's amazing.
I think it's genuinely pretty interesting. Like they went a different direction, like with the break and smash system. Like and
the Engage system. I think the Engage system is amazing, man.
They tried something
new. And the way
new,
they like balance it out too. They balance out like how many how many rings you get from the start. Like you start off with like hardly any emblems, but at the end you have like all of them. So it's just like, they balance it out really well.
Really interesting like twists and turns in the story, which is like, dude, that's cool. Like in the middle of the game, there's like this huge twist, and you're just like, bruh, like I'm literally like what am I gonna do? It's like that, that's pretty cheeky. Like I will say this, like I don't think the characters stuck with me. I think some of the characters definitely could have been cut out. You could have cut out some of the fluff. Like that chef character, I still don't know anything about him, and I still don't know anything about Bouchon either. You could have combined those two.
I mean, to be fair, those two are like the two like least enjoyed characters, but
it's like I think if I were to improve upon Fire Emblem Engage, I would give them more development time, give them more time to cut down on useless characters, maybe develop some certain characters in lores and kingdoms and such. And then also, and then that's actually just pretty much it, honestly. Like the gameplay is pretty fun, and the story it's all right. It's like not bad. Like people kind of like meme on it where it's like, oh, the 4Kids intro and stuff is like bad.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think the story, the theme, like not the story, the theme and the music and the art style and the gameplay all were very, very good.
100%. Yeah.
I think the story, as well as some of the personal character dialogue, definitely could have had more time in the oven. That's the big thing though that I really have a problem with. And honestly, like that's probably like the thing that you could fix with more development time and such.
Yeah, it's so funny to think about like the differences between Three Houses and Engage. Like I feel like if you combine the two best parts about the game, you have like maybe with the perfect Fire Emblem game.
Yeah.
But like Three Houses has stronger stories and stronger characters than Engage. But in my opinion, at least, I think a lot of people will disagree. But in my opinion, I think Engage has better gameplay
and better graphics.
More better graphics. Music was fine. Music is like both good. Both good. But yeah, better graphics for sure. And in my opinion, better replayability as well. I think despite Three Houses having like, you know, the expansive class system, like I just don't want to play through the same maps again. Yeah, it's just that you have 4 different routes, but the game is the same each time. Why have 4 routes when it's the exact same thing? At least Fire Emblem Fates, you know, they had maybe besides the first 5 maps, like in Birthright, Conquest, Revelation, you maybe have like, I don't know. Well, I guess Revelation does combine some maps, but they have a lot of new maps in each route, right? They have a lot of different maps in each route. But Blue Lions, Golden Deer, Silver Snow, it's the same freaking route. They have
literally
one map
same.
That's different in each one. It's just like, come on, man.
I think the perfect Fire Emblem game for me would be either a remake, like another Echoes of an older Fire Emblem game, which is, again, Echoes slaps. They've do it again. It will slap again. I trust me. The other big thing is that, like, I do think it's understandable. I think if you had a game that had the graphics and the combat of either Fire Emblem Fates or Fire Emblem Engage, didn't focus on the entire series, but just focused on a single-minded story, and then you took the storytelling and the character engagement from Fire Emblem Three Houses, which, oh my god, that was so good. You put those 2 things together, that'd be the perfect Fire Emblem game, in my mind. It's just like all the elements are there. They have the sauce, they have the ingredients. They just need to cook a little bit longer. Like, don't give me an unfinished ravioli. Give me like a 5-star Michelin chef, like 3-star Michelin restaurant, like ravioli right out of the oven. Right? Hit me with the cheese and the tomatoes. That's what I'm looking for, IS.
Indeed. I think that just goes back to our earlier discussion of like, we just want more quality. Like I don't need, like, as much as I love Fire Emblem, I don't need the next Fire Emblem game for another 2 years. I mean, I do want to see the Genealogy remake, but honestly, if I don't see a Fire Emblem game until 2026, I'm okay with that. I still have plenty of other games to play. Like, allow them to just have as much time as possible, just make a beautiful,
timeless,
awesome
classic
product.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's honestly like where we can leave it off. I mean, I think that was pretty good. We kind of just came full circle like 3 different times.
we could talk about Hazbin Hotel if you want to continue with that.
We could, but I think I might put a pin in that one for now since we have talked for a while.
Okay, gotcha.
And I do want to see if Race Car has continued with the series because I'd like to see if
I need to catch up with episode 6. I've heard it's very impactful, and I think I've got good things to say, but I got to cook on it a little bit longer. But all of the other thoughts that I've said in this podcast were fully cooked, like right out of the oven. Like I've been cooking, I've been sitting on this, and I'm gonna watch like the Palworld community. I'm really fascinated to see how this is gonna threaten or help the monster catching community. It's like it wasn't as big as it's not like not Yokai Watch, it's not Digimon. Like this is kind of like threatening. Is what's happening here. So I'm kind of interested. Like I'll keep my finger on the pulse, and I'm of course gonna still watch like Fire Emblem Engage stuff. During my off time while I've been playing Palworld, I've been actually listening to Zeez's Fire Emblem Engage playthrough, just because I've been wanting to play Fire Emblem Engage, but I just haven't had the time to because I've been playing Palworld. Let's be honest, but I know it's interesting to watch your playthroughs these because especially with the Fell Xenologue, like the DLC for that game, like you were just like,
oh yeah,
you were just crying.
That's hard
because it was like,
yeah, the DLC for that game is freaking hard, man. It's so hard.
Like the last map, I just was listening to a playthrough of you doing it, and you were like, oh my god, man, they should get rid of this unit because it's literally, in the next Fire Emblem game they should get rid of it, and then they go to the next turn and like, how am I supposed to win? How am I supposed to win?
Yeah, dude, I spent like 10 hours doing that map, dude. It took forever. Still not as bad as Conquest Endgame, but it's up there. It's like right below it.
Holy.
Either way, though, I think that's gonna be it from us. This is actually a really fun podcast. We got to definitely dive deep into a lot of the different interesting topics. But yeah, anything final to say before we end off, friend?
We'll probably do this again. I love Fire Emblem. I love Pokemon. I like Palworld a lot, which is basically a Pokemon clone in certain ways. So, yeah, we'll see. I'll keep my finger on the pulse. Until then, I've been the little rookie. This has been Zeez, VovG. Please tune in next time. We're still reading your comments. Believe me, we're reading your comments, and there will come a day when we will address all the comments and all the Reddit stuff. So please keep posting, keep showing your love for the community and stuff. Keep showing your love for the podcast. We will when we have time, we will read it and stuff, and maybe there'll just be a whole like viewer like Q&A like centered podcast in some point in the future. We'd be very interested in that. But yeah, we appreciate the support and the love for the podcast. So yeah, this has been the Little Rookie signing out. Zeez, I'm gonna hand it to you.
Awesome. That was a pretty good outro. I don't think I need to say much else. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.